coming up on Sleep, Eat, Perform, Repeat.
When I was 17, my best friend took his own life. Didn't know he was struggling, had never really heard the term mental health referenced in any part of my life. After my best friend died, I went through my own struggle with pretty severe depression for years. So I started going to therapy at the age of 20, and once I kind of came out of that first bout after 6 months and I was in a better place, I just kind of had this burning urge to prevent as many suicides as possible. One, because people shouldn't feel like they're so alone that no one's there for them, but two, bereaving suicide is one of the most traumatic things I've ever had to go through, and if you can prevent suicide, it means you also prevent people having to bereave suicide. That's why mental health became really important to me. It's just to prevent suicide and prevent people feeling like they're alone. Hi, my name's Daragh Fleming. I'm an author, poet and mental health activist. I have a new book on mental health called Lonely Boy coming out November 24th with Book Hub Publishing. If you want to find more details about what I do, you can visit thoughtstoobig.ie. This is my episode with Sleep, Eat, Perform, Repeat.
Welcome to Sleep, Eat, Perform, Repeat with your hosts David Clancy and Kieran Dunn. This is a podcast about high performance. What we are striving to achieve is to figure out what makes high-performing individuals tick, why they do what they do, and why they are successful. Enjoy a journey of stories, lessons, and learnings.
Today we spoke with Daragh Fleming, writer and award-winning mental health activist. Daragh Fleming is an author, freelance writer and award-winning mental health blogger from Cork, Ireland. He is an MA in Linguistics and a BA in Applied Psychology, but also a head full of notions, as he says. Daragh has a passion for normalising the chat around mental health and is the founder of Thoughts Too Big, a blog and enterprise that focuses on overcoming daily mental health issues. Daragh's debut in non-fiction, Lonely Boy, a collection of essays on mental health, arrives November 24th. Please support this work by buying a copy. Daragh shared with us his traumatic personal story about why mental health is what he writes and speaks about, and also why that period paved the way for him to study the mind in university. He explained his current writer-in-residence role in Spain, and also what his writing process looks like. We unpacked where he finds inspiration for poetry, fiction, and non-fiction, what trains had to do with writing, some of his most popular blogs on mental health, and his charitable support for Pieta House, Crisis Helpline, and so forth. He explained the meaning behind his motto, be sound and drink water, and how to recognise if someone is struggling with their mental health. This was a powerful episode for us. Thanks, Daragh.
Daragh Fleming, welcome to the show, sir. You're in sunny Spain, we're in Dublin. We are jealous.
Thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, as we kind of talked about beforehand, in Olot, about 2 hours north of Barcelona on a writer's residency. So yeah, really grateful to be here and grateful to be on the podcast too. I really appreciate it.
Of course. And you were saying to us off air there, and it's really interesting, we're writer residency. For those listening, what's that all about? What does it mean?
So essentially, I applied for this in January and forgot about it. And then in July, they got back to me and they're like, we'd like to grant you a place. So what it means is they give you a kind of apartment to stay in. They take care of all your meals, and it just gives you the space and time to work on whatever project you want to work on. So here at the moment, there's 3 other writers from different parts of Europe, and there's one concert pianist. And all of us are just working on whatever we feel like working on. I'm working on a new book. Obviously the pianist is working on new music. So it just gives you, it cuts out like a week of time where you can actually just do hyper-focused work on different things, because, you know, when you're back at home with a busy schedule and different things going on, it's kind of hard to find that time. So this just gives you that opportunity.
I think for a lot of not only creatives, but a lot of people now, it sounds like an absolute dream to get that space, to get that week where you can focus on hyper focus, like what we'd speak with Cal Newport about. Mm-hmm. If you're talking about getting to that point, give us an idea of your background. Where did you come from? What studies did you do in order to get to a point where you're getting off to Spain to do hyper focus work that we're all jealous of?
5 days in Spain, and we want to go.
Yeah, like my career to date has been unplanned. Like I always tell people, I've never had a plan. I've just kind of followed my gut and followed my passion. I think that's kind of the most effective way to get where you want to be going, especially if you don't know where you want to be going. But for me, so I did my undergraduate degree in applied psychology in Cork. Then I did a master's in linguistics in UCD in Dublin. And it was kind of during that time in my master's where I started taking writing seriously. So I had been doing the blog Thoughts Too Big since 2015. And then in 2017, 2018, I started writing short fiction during my master's. And I got to a point in my master's where I had more written on a manuscript for a book than I did for my thesis. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing here. So that's when I kind of like started focusing in on writing after the master's. Got the first collection of short stories published in 2019, and then from there it's just become the thing I want to do. Kind of, I suppose, awoken in me like, oh, this is the thing that makes makes the most sense for me in terms of a pursuit, because I was always the type of person who like was jealous of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do. Like my brother knew exactly what he wanted to be, a lot of my friends did, and I was kind of like, I have no idea. So then writing kind of found me, and from there I've been writing in kind of mental health circles with A Lust for Life. I work for them now, A Lust for Life charity. And just writing in the blog. The blog eventually won some awards for being a mental health space, and now I have a book on mental health called Lonely Boy coming out on November 24th with Book Hub Publishing. So it's kind of like, it's a bit of an unsatisfying answer when people ask me like, how do you get to that place? Because I don't really know. Like I just kind of did what felt right for me, and things, I was lucky enough to just find opportunities and take them. And I like whenever I do workshops now, like the Irish Writer Centre or something, I always start by saying I'm a professional bluffer, meaning that like I just chance my arm. See, like the only thing people can say is no. So, and rejection's quite a big part of writing. So I've kind of gotten used to being rejected a lot, and if you ask, sometimes people say yes, and that's when you get the opportunities,
Like that.
What does your writing process look like? I mean, we're really curious, and we've read a lot of your online blogs, and there's always something behind them. There's so much meaning behind it. But what does it look like when you're there now in Spain and you're sitting down for a day? What do you do to get into that headspace? And what's a good day for you? What does success look like in that day?
Yeah, it's like, so a lot of my like morning routine has nothing to do with the writing process, but I guess it's all linked. So I do a lot of meditating in the morning. I'll read something. I think that those two things for me are kind of non-negotiable in the morning, because it kind of gets you in the right headspace of being in tune with how you're feeling, and especially when you're writing about mental health, that's really important. Because with the blog, like essentially the blog, the reason it has the legs it's had, because it's been going on for 7 years, is because for the blog posts I reflect on what kind of affected my mental health during the previous week, and then I delve into that. And often enough, people can resonate with that, because it's just kind of a daily mental health battle. It's not necessarily like mental illness, so it might be just like anxiety over work or anxiety over relationships, or having a bad day. And it's just kind of tapping into your own experiences can drive a lot of creative spark. So even like when I'm writing short stories, like a lot of my own experiences will influence what I'm writing about. So it is a lot. I think as my career's gone on in writing, I've become aware that the better I know myself, the easier it is to write about things that resonate with people. Because when you know yourself better, you're just more authentic. It doesn't become this kind of superficial, I'm only writing to write. It's more of I'm writing because I really want to delve into certain issues that like are minor right now, but could become bigger issues if they're not looked at and inspected. And so the writing process is a lot of self-reflection initially, and then depending on what I'm writing, be it like poetry or fiction, obviously it changes, because you have to create more raw with fiction. It can't be based on your life. It has to be very like raw new stuff, but it is still all influenced by day-to-day life.
There's a lot I want to touch on there, but I'll go back firstly to the meditation. Just give us an idea of your practice. What do you do? Do you use an app? Is it timed? Are you just sitting there doing body scans? What do you use?
I started meditating when I was 20, and I used Headspace because that was guided meditations, body scans, and especially when you're new to meditation, it can be quite difficult to know what to do, because essentially you're just supposed to sit there and not think, which is one of the hardest things to do. So, but that kind of over the last few years, I've been just doing solo meditating, just concentrate on breathing. I also would recommend transcendental meditation, and that's the kind of the classic one where someone's humming in the background, and it just because all you really need is something to focus on, so that it means your brain's less inclined to get distracted. But I think, and I was only talking about this recently with a few young people in a workshop here in Spain. I think people have this idea of meditation that you're not allowed to think, and that if you are thinking that you're doing it wrong, but it's actually, you're always going to think. Like, it's impossible to stop yourself from thinking, but it's just becoming aware of the fact that you've started thinking automatically and then drawing yourself back to your breath or your transcendental kind of hum, whatever it is. And I do that anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes in the morning.
Wow.
And that just kind of sets you up. I think it's really important for, as I said, getting grounded, figuring out how you're feeling in your body at the beginning of the day, I think is really important, because often when I don't meditate, I mightn't even be aware that I might be feeling like anxious or stressed. But if I meditate, I'm like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more anxious than I was yesterday. And that allows me to be proactive and maybe, exercise earlier in the day than I would have if I didn't know.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think with meditation, we often think, oh yeah, when I do it, I'm meant to feel something. I'm meant to be much better, I'm meant to be focused. But we're not very sure about the outcomes until we've done a process of it. And then we notice things like, I'm aware of my anxiety more so now. And that must be a result of the meditation. I think so. Yeah. My point here is just, if anyone's trying it, if anyoanyone's doing it, don't be expecting outcomes straight away that you're aware of. You might come down the line a few weeks or a few days and just think, I feel a bit more relaxed, or I respond better to my significant other giving out to me a little bit. I was more relaxed. I was more calm. I was more accepting of my mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And even like before that, I think it gives you, because, we're in an era where everyone has their phones on them all the time and there's a lot of input. It gives you a little bit of the day where you can just be very present and only focusing on what's happening right now, because for the rest of the day you might be like emails, deadlines, I have to get this done. So it just gives you that moment to just be still. And that's why, like, if you can, I mean, in Ireland it's quite difficult, but if you can be outside when you're meditating, I think that adds another layer of kind of just being in the moment.
Yeah, there was a nice one on Headspace the other day. I've only started getting back into it again. And he said, don't think of this as a chore that you have to do your meditation now. Think of it as, this is 10 minutes of your time that you get to spend just relaxing. You just get to sit there. You just get to observe thoughts as they go. And that's a good frame to look at it, instead of thinking, I'll do this meditation now. Oh, a little bit of resistance towards it. It's just, this is your time.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. 100%.
So why mental health, Daragh? Like, obviously you've won awards and there's a book coming and blogging for a long time. What is it about that space?
Well, it is a very personal story, which is one I'm happy to share. When I was 17, my best friend took his own life, and he was 18 at the time, and didn't know anything about it. Didn't know he was struggling. Had never really heard the term mental health referenced in any part of my life. It didn't really come up in school. It wasn't really in the kind of mainstream media, which is completely different now, like 10 years later. I mean, everyone's talking about it and it's far more accepting a place. So my introduction to mental health was quite a tragic one, quite a damaging one. After my best friend died, I went through my own kind of struggle with pretty severe depression for years. And once I came out of that, so I started going to therapy at the age of 20. And once I kind of came out of that first bout of therapy after 6 months and I was in a better place, I just kind of had this burning urge to, I guess, like the very rudimental thing about me and mental health is I just want to prevent as many suicides as possible. One, because, people shouldn't feel like they're so alone that no one's there for them. But two, bereaving suicide is one of the most traumatic things I've ever had to go through. And if you can prevent suicide, it means you also prevent people having to bereave suicide. So that's kind of the genesis of why mental health became important to me, and why it always will be, is because Irby, passed when he needn't have, if we had talked openly and made mental health a normal conversation, then maybe he could have come up to me or come up to a parent or a teacher and been like, hey, look, I'm struggling, I need help. But he felt like he couldn't because, there's the added layer of being a young man and men struggling with talking about their mental health. So he felt like he couldn't, and as a result, he died. So that's why mental health became really important to me. It's just to prevent suicide and prevent people feeling like they're alone.
Looking back and going, you're probably in psychology at the time.
Yeah.
When you went into psychology, was that a result, do you think, of what you'd been through? Was it something that led on? You wanted to learn more about the mind?
Definitely. So as I said, like I never really knew what I wanted to do in my life, but so I was in fifth year when he died, and then did my leaving cert. And you're filling out the CEO, and I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. But psychology, I was kind of drawn to, again, for the mental health aspect, to learn more about like what goes wrong when someone gets depressed or suicidal or has an anxiety disorder. I just wanted to learn about it because I felt like the more knowledge I had, the better I was able to like fortify my own mind, and then further along the line maybe help other people fortify their mind. So yeah, 100%. Like the reason I went into psychology is because of Irby's passing. Absolutely.
And so you said the therapist piece at 20.
Mm-hmm.
What was the piece that allowed you to go there, to finally take the step? Maybe there was resistance for signing up for therapy and looking to get benefit from it. What was it that allowed you to go there?
Yeah, there was huge. There was a lot of self stigma where I was like telling myself that there was nothing wrong, that I shouldn't be feeling this way. So there was a lot of denial of how I was feeling initially. But what actually ended up happening was I was on a night out in Cork with my friends in Ragweek, and I had a huge panic attack in the street. And that was my first panic attack that I've had a few since, but that was the first one. And after that, then I suppose that kind of burst the bubble, because for a while I was like trying to convince myself that there was nothing wrong because I couldn't feel anything. I wasn't feeling sad, I wasn't feeling anger, I wasn't feeling happiness, but because I wasn't feeling sad or angry, I was like, there's nothing wrong. But that's actually like one of the main symptoms of depression, is that it's not an overwhelming sadness, it's an overwhelming numbness. But you can kind of cope with that because, when you don't feel anything, you don't feel bad. But after the panic attack, it kind of all, there's a lot of reflection, and I was like, Jesus, there's something seriously wrong, because I was just doing all these things to distract myself from the fact that my mental health was in total disrepair. So after the panic attack, I talked to some of my, the people in my course, and it was a good space to have friends in because they were all aware of mental health because they were in psychology. So there was no stigma with them. I was like, I think I might need to go to therapy. And they're like, yeah, we all go. You can sign up here in college. There's absolutely, it was just a very normal conversation. But it took me getting to like a very low place with panic attacks and depression before I admitted to myself that I needed help. And even admitting that and signing up gave me a huge sense of relief and weight off my shoulders, because I was finally getting the help that I needed. And you can't really accept help until you accept it yourself that you need help. Because, if you're in denial and someone tries to help you, you tend to just shrug it off and be like, I don't need your help, there's nothing wrong. But then when you actually admit that you need help, that's when therapy and different techniques start to actually help.
How can you get to the point when you see that in someone, though? So you're obviously trying to prevent that. So how can we understand that actually there's a dialogue needed to be happening here? We need to open up communication. There's something I'm sensing or I'm seeing. How can we recognize maybe in our friends or peers that we see some of the signs maybe that they're struggling?
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because it's the mind. Like everyone reacts to stuff differently. So I think there is a trope, but it's a trope for a reason, that a lot of people who are struggling don't outwardly show it. So whenever you're around them, they're like the happiest. They kind of fill up the room. They're the most kind of like putting on a mask. But I think for me, when I see it in people, it's like when they start to kind of self-isolate naturally, like they're not really coming out as much. They're not really as responsive. A big thing for me is I stopped taking joy in things that used to really bring me joy. So I was like really, really into playing basketball. Like basketball was a huge part of my life, and it just became a chore. Other signs might be that people are trying to be overproductive, because again, for me, I tried to do as much college work, do as much gym work as I could, just so I didn't have to be on my own and my own thoughts. So I think the main one is when people kind of start to retreat from things that they'd usually find very enjoyable, and they're kind of aloof, maybe, just not texting back, not being engaging. That's a huge sign, but it can be very difficult. Like, as I said, with Irby, like he was obviously struggling, but I had no idea. So like it is one of these things that you kind of I would rather misstep and think someone's going through something and be wrong rather than not address it. So like with my friends now these days, even if I don't think anything's going wrong, I'll be like, how's your mental health? How are you feeling? Are you going through any bad patches? And often enough, even that question allows people to open up because they realize someone actually gives a shit. So it's just, and that's why normalizing the conversation around mental health is like the most effective way to figure out if people are struggling, because if you can just bring up your own mental health, it allows them to be like, oh, I can talk about my mental health with this person because they're talking about theirs. So it's difficult as like, lay people, not psychiatrists or psychologists, to identify when someone's struggling. So I think it's, if you cast a wide enough net and just make mental health a normal thing to talk about, that generally draws it out of people and they can, talk about it to you.
With writing, a lot of the time we hear that the more you write, the more you're able to convey clear sentences in your journal.
Mm-hmm.
It often systemizes your thoughts in your head.
Yeah.
Have you found that it's helped you over the last few years, the last 10 years, right?
Yeah, like journaling's been a huge thing. Lonely Boy started as a journal, so there was a lot of stuff with me with in particular with like romantic relationships. I was emotionally unavailable for a long time due to my depression, and I couldn't make relationships work. So I started journaling during the start of the pandemic to try and figure that out. And as you write, you kind of, because it allows you to formulate your thoughts and it's very like definite structure, you can kind of unlock different, I suppose, realizations that you can't, or it's more difficult to unlock if you're just thinking, because your thoughts can be all over the place. But if it's structured, you're like, I feel this way, this happened, then the relationship fell apart, and then you're like, why did it fall apart? So it gives you a kind of a structured space to really just be objective of what's going wrong, what's going right, and that allows you to, I suppose, get to a more clear realization. Whereas if you don't write, I mean, obviously talking helps, like if you're talking to a therapist, that helps, but if you're on your own and you're trying to work through stuff, thinking alone, because there's so much biases and there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't want to address or you don't want to admit, you'll tend to have blind spots for stuff you could work on. And I think writing allows you to see those blind spots easier.
With regards to some of the pieces that you've put out, Daragh, over the last, Fire Prevention Day, just, do you understand your impact? And there's so many there. And again, just the consistency of sticking with it is really a testament to you. Are there any pieces that, you wrote down and you were kind of really, proud about it, or you either evoked emotion, or someone said, I really got a lot from that, or that really helped me? What's that like, that whole maybe response for you and for someone maybe reading a piece like we did?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm really bad at predicting which posts will do well, because often enough the ones that I'm like, this isn't great, tends to resonate way more with people. Yeah. So it's really, and then there'll be ones that I'm like, this is brilliant, and I'll just be like,
they're not the ones.
But there's one in particular I wrote, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, called "This Is What Anxiety Feels Like," and I basically tried to articulate in a very kind of digestible way, like what anxiety feels like when you're feeling it. And the response to that was just a lot of people being like, you've put into words what I've struggled to like put into words for my whole life, because people find it difficult to like, because emotions are so like complex and convoluted, it's really difficult to like articulate what exactly they feel like. So with that post in particular, it felt really nice for me, one, to be able to, this is what anxiety feels like, and now I know, so whenever I feel like this, that means I'm getting anxious. And then it also helped other people to be like, that's how I feel, I'm anxious, or I'm feeling anxiety. And I never, sometimes like it comes up where I'll talk about something like anxiety, and then like one of my friends will be like, oh, I felt like that, I just thought that was like how you're like just how you feel, like how I always feel. And I'm like, no, that's anxiety is what you're experiencing. Like, and I think that helps people, and that's the most satisfying thing about the blog, is when it resonates with people and people can take something away, and you get a message or DM that someone's just like, this really helped me today and I needed to read this today. And like, again, it's impossible to predict, or maybe you can predict it, but I'm terrible at predicting it. Personally, I have no idea which ones are going to hit.
It's just something about, I think, with my own personal situation, that when someone would talk to me, I'd often advise exercise and trying to get good habits as one of the first things, because mood follows action. I generally say, like, you get in a better mood from your neurochemistry that's going on in your body. with yourself, your story, you were going to the gym, you were probably overdoing it. You probably felt you were over focused on certain things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Have I missed a little bit there when I'm talking to people, or what would you recommend for people who may be trying that avenue?
I don't think you can overdo it, but I think it depends on the intention behind the action. So like for me, when I was depressed, the reason I was working out so often is because I was trying to run away from the emotion and mask it with like the endorphins and serotonin you get from exercise. But if you use it as like a tool, like so for example, if I'm like have low mood on a day, then I know I can go for a run and I know that'll give me a little bit of a boost.
Yeah.
So that isn't me running away from the emotion, that's me addressing the emotion. Whereas in college, I was very much just like, there's a lot of dark stuff under the water that I don't want to address, so I'm just going to do everything I can to ignore it, and that's why I was being overproductive. So I don't think there's absolutely no misstep in telling people to act so that their mind will become a more like habitable place. But the intention behind the action, I think, is really important.
Yeah, instead of distraction, think addressing. That's
Yeah.
excellent, yeah.
Not quite like what Draymond Green did.
No,
But,
if you see basketball.
be sound and drink water.
Yeah.
Love it. And you're drinking water, as are we, and we understand be sound. Maybe the Americans don't understand what that means. What's that about, Dar? What's be sound and drink water mean?
Be sound, I think. Okay, so a few years ago we had this kind of obnoxious hashtag be kind, and then what happened as a result of that is a lot of the be kind people on the internet were the most nasty people. I found that like they could be the most, trolling or most aggressive online. So I didn't really like that hashtag, but I think be sound, it's quite like, obviously be sound's quite an Irish phrase, but it's just like, for me, be sound is don't be doing things like for the sake of validation or recognition, or you're doing good things to get attention. It's be sound because being sound is the right thing to do. And that's kind of informed by like a lot of stoic philosophy, which I'd be hugely interested in. So be sound is like, for me, like I kind of changed, I got a tattoo of it, but I changed it to be good because it's more universal. But it's the same idea where like in any moment that you can be a good person just for the sake of being a good person, not for any like awards or achievements, just because it's the right thing to do, I think is really important. And then the drink water thing. So my second book of short stories is called If You're Reading This, Then Drink Water. And the reason I called it that is because from the ages of 12 to 21, I fainted 7 times because of dehydration.
Wow.
So, yeah. So like as I was growing up, I just never really understood, because it's something, there's 2 things we have to do, and that's hydrate, because if you don't hydrate, you're going to die in 3 days, and you have to sleep every day. And because they're like things you have to do, I didn't really appreciate the benefit or the impact that they have. So I really and I was like hugely into sport as a teenager, so I was using up a lot of my like hydration during the day and then just not replenishing it, so that resulted in like me getting faint and passing out. So those 2 things, be good and stay hydrated, are like as much reminders to me as they are to other people, because if I don't remind myself to drink water, then I get dehydrated very easily. So that's just a kind of like, water is just a good thing to drink, because there's some people that I know, and it terrifies me that they don't drink water, they just drink like juice or like fizzy drinks or like energy drinks, and that's terrifying, because like it's just there's no substitute for water. It's boring, it doesn't taste great, but it does have a huge impact on your physical and mental health. Like there's studies that I've looked into where they did a study, and you're more likely to develop an anxiety disorder if you're dehydrated versus if you're hydrated, and it's the same with depression. So it does have like an impact on how well your mind functions as well as your body. So as well as it just being like a little bit of a gimmick and something to remind me to stay hydrated, it does actually have genuine impact as well.
Marcus Aurelius was probably walking on with a B sound tattoo in his arm back
then. I'd say so.
I hope so.
I was actually going to bring up Stoic philosophy. You say author, writer, poet. Who's inspiring you? Who has inspired you across your career, be that in poetry, be that in writing, or in Stoic philosophy?
Yeah, I think like I remember, I'd say it was like 6 years ago was the first time I picked up Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And it's a bizarre book because it's so relatable to the modern world, and it's written in a way that like it's not like dense like other philosophy. Like if you read like Nietzsche or Albert Camus, it's very dense, very difficult to like figure out what they're saying. But Marcus Aurelius was just like, he never intended for it to be published. It was just like a journal of like aphorisms he had to like guide himself. So he was like, don't do this is the right thing to do, etc. And then obviously someone found it and published it. And I think it's just such an accessible book of philosophy compared to other philosophers. Seneca, moral letters, same kind of vibe. A little bit more convoluted than Marcus, but like same energy. And then if you want Stoic philosophy broken down on like a daily basis, the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday has been huge. I read that every day, and it's an evergreen book because they just give you 1 page per day for the year, and you can just keep coming back to it. And then in terms of like writing inspiration, there's a wealth of Irish writers that are incredible. Like I could list them for the day, but I think my favorite writer is Rob Doyle. He's a writer from Dublin. I think he lives in Berlin at the moment. Just because like when I read his book Threshold, and what resonated with me is that it was so raw and so honest, and he was being honest about like the not so nice parts of himself as well, like when he was being an asshole or when he was being, you know, maybe misogynistic or whatever it is, but he was just being really honest. And that really struck me, that like there's no point in writing anything unless you're going to be very honest. And I took a lot of that into Lonely Boy, because the Lonely Boy is addressing like my own mental health, but it's also addressing my role in my mental health becoming bad. And for a lot of my early 20s, you know, especially in terms of relationships, I was just kind of acting the dick and just not giving people the respect they deserve because my mental health was in a very bad place. And I think that honesty really resonates with people, and because it would have been easy to write Lonely Boy and just made myself look good, but that isn't the true story. And therefore to me it's just not worth writing if you're not going to be honest about it, you know.
We were looking at your website there, and you've obviously had some opportunities to share your story and kind of the insights gleaned from that. You know, Irish Writers Centre, obviously a little bit on the blogging there, Irish Migrants, Pfizer, companies, you know, of that caliber. And then obviously the places, I suppose, the charities that obviously are really trying to build awareness around, you know, Pieta House and Samaritans and so forth. What's the future look like for you? You've got your book coming out there, you know, what's going on in the next kind of 3, 4, 5 months for you?
So the book comes out the end of next month, and then like I suppose the next few months depend on how the book.
No plan. I know. Sorry, asterisk. No plan. Right.
Yeah.
No plan, but
it depends on how the book is received. Like I work with A Lust for Life, the mental health charity, anyway, so I'll continue to work with them. They're a brilliant space, doing a lot for young people's mental health. And then, you know, like speaking opportunities, the last 6 months have kind of ramped up, and I imagine they'll continue to ramp up after the book. So I think like in terms of making a living and like, you know, what I do as a career, it'll be a blend of mental health writing, working with A Lust for Life, and then, you know, public speaking, whether it's about writing specifically or mental health or a mix of both, because they do kind of, from my writing career, they're very much one and the same. So yeah, it's just kind of, as always, take every day as it comes and just do whatever feels right for me. That's kind of the plan.
Because we do things that aren't great sometimes, and everybody probably isn't proud of every moment of their day. Even watching sport the other day, there's a guy called Devontae Adams, plays for the Las Vegas Raiders, shoved the cameraman after he lost, but then instantly went in and tweeted about how he regretted it straight away, and that's not him. So he was trying to let, essentially, I think the message was that his actions weren't who he is, and he just acted in a way. What do you do to overcome maybe a moment where you've not acted in the way you're proud of, and frame it in a way that's helpful for you going forward?
Yeah, like, and that it's a very good example, because he was obviously very react emotionally, and then a lot of self-awareness as soon as the emotion subsided. And I kind of touched on it already, but becoming self-aware means you do have to know the good and bad parts about yourself, because I think we tend to naturally, like, we all know like our good aspects and what we're good at, but we tend to avoid thinking about the shitty parts of ourselves. Like, so for me, one of the things, I'm not really good in the mornings. I can be very irritable, and if people come near me, I'm just like cranky or whatever. And for a long time I would have like not addressed that, But now that I address it in the morning, there's more effort to I suppose be more tolerant of people and be more understanding that like some people do want to talk in the morning, and that's only one small aspect. But I think what's important is like, and I think I have a blog on this as well. It's like sometimes you're the villain, because there's this. So like no villain in history or in movies has ever thought they're the bad guy. They always think they're coming from the right place, think they're the hero of the story, and I think we all do that. So whenever we get in conflict with other people, we always naturally are like, I'm right, they're wrong, they're in the wrong. Like my reasoning behind acting like this is just, but if someone else acted like this, I'd call them an asshole. Yeah. So I think we do kind of have a bias towards our own behavior, and it's becoming aware of that and realizing like sometimes you lash out and you are in the wrong, and that is true for everyone. And I like social media plays a bit of a role in this as well, because everyone only posts their like highlights and when they're feeling happy and when they're like doing good, but like real life isn't like that. Like real life is sometimes you're a shithead, sometimes you're having a bad day, sometimes you do a bad thing, and it's just being aware of that and trying to be aware of that in the moment, so that when you are having maybe a negative reaction to something, just being aware of like you can't take back words that you say, you can't take back actions, and it's just, you know, you can apologize in the aftermath, but that isn't as effective as not doing the bad thing in the first place. So it is just becoming self-aware, I think, is the best way to deal with it.
Where's your favorite place to write? That's my last question. You know, is the train a good place to write poetry, right? And yeah. What do you think? Like, is it the coffee shop or where, or maybe is it somewhere quiet and secluded away in a retreat in Spain? You know, where's your happy space for writing?
I think it depends on the medium. Like, so poetry for me is very in the moment. Like, you'll just have a kind of an emotional connection to something, or you'll be reflecting on something. So the reason train poems was fun is because like I was traveling around Europe and I had these like 6-hour train journeys that I could reflect on stuff, and that's why, you know, writing poetry there made sense. But if I'm writing nonfiction, I need to kind of be on my own and have no input, and just because it's very much like you're hammering out like autobiographical kind of what happened when it happened. So that is very much informed by like being on your own. But then I find with writing fiction, the inspiration comes from just living your own life. So whenever I've had like an idea for a story or a plot line, it hasn't come when I'm just sitting staring at a blank page. It's come when I'm having pints with my friends or out for coffee or out for a run. It never comes when you want it. So it's having that kind of versatility of like, if I'm out with my friend and I have an idea for like a short story, then I just need to have like either my notebook or my phone, jot down the idea, and then come back to it like on a Sunday morning when I have like a bit of time to myself, and then start writing. So it always does come back to like being on your own to write stuff, but I think the inspiration comes from different places, and like ideas for nonfiction rarely come from real life, but ideas for fiction nearly always come from just interacting with people.
Great stuff. And I was going to go to the signature question, last question of the show, but I thought since we're talking about mental health and we're talking about creating a space, how is your mental health today?
It's good. Feeling, because I got here on Monday, and like the last few days I've been reflecting on like this opportunity is a very big privilege in my life, and I'm just feeling really grateful for it. And there's been different opportunities in the last few weeks with speaking and the book. So just like there's a lot of gratitude and there's a lot to be grateful for in my life at the moment. And I think trying to find gratitude really does help mental health. So at the moment it's easy to have good mental health because there's a lot to be grateful for. So at the moment it's pretty good. Yeah.
Excellent. And then we'll go on to the big one. What does high performance mean to you, Daragh Fleming?
High performance. Whenever I think of high performance, I always do think about athletic ability. My brother is a extremely high performing athlete. He runs ultra marathons, so he just came fourth in the Kerryway Ultra, which is a 200-kilometer race. So for me, like that would be the most obvious example and definition of high performance. It's doing things that other people can't do, and it's usually down to just sheer willpower. Everyone could possibly do it, but it's having the determination and dealing with a lot of pain and dealing with a lot of an internal voice to give up. Dealing with that and still doing the thing is what high performance is to me, I think.
Very much as to what you're doing with your blog, right? I mean, you're dealing with pain and thinking and still putting it out there, not as very much as for you probably as an exercise, but also for everyone else. So that's how we would define it in this one. So
appreciate it. Thank you.
For sure. Daragh, thanks very much for your time. We are grateful and for opening up and sharing your story, and just keep doing it. We're looking forward to reading the book.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Love the podcast. I'm really grateful to be